Hello and welcome. Today, my guest is Shirley Laboy, the Chief Operating Officer of Bondurant. We are going to dive into her incredible non-linear journey from legal assistant to the C-suite and why she believes that the future of law firms depends on intentional collaboration in a post-COVID world. We'll also get into why she recently hired a fractional CMO to help her associates build the pipelines they'll need to become the next generational partners. Shirley, welcome to the Growth Switch.
Thank you so much for this opportunity, Alex. I appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Now, Shirley, a lot of young lawyers, just as more senior attorneys, they like to have everything prepared and in the perfect conditions before starting something new. When you first started your career at 23 years of old, that wasn't quite the situation, was it?
No, it was not. And I'm actually jealous of those who can put together a path and stick to it. But no, I was a single parent at the age of 23, and a very close friend approached me at the time and said, "Hey, why don't we go to paralegal school?" And my response was, "Okay, let's do it." And so we did, and I can look back on those days with fond memories of bringing my son and going to the law library with her and her child at the time and studying and putting together scenarios and getting through the program. And I so wanted to be a paralegal. And when I first applied for a position in Silicon Valley at a regional firm, I realized paralegals work a lot of hours. And I had a small child, so I decided to move into the legal secretary field instead, which was extremely rewarding. I started in the taxation department, and one of the partners saw enough in me and that he enrolled me in a master's taxation course just to observe, and I learned a lot at the time and then moved on from there. Maybe, and I do this as it references my son's age, maybe at the age of about 10, I was working at another law firm, and again, someone saw something in me that they decided was in my wheelhouse and asked if I would manage a group in an IP law firm, the docketing department, the paralegals. And so I said, "But I've never done that before." And she said, "You'd be great." And so I decided to move into management at around the year 2000, 1999, maybe. And 3 months after I took that position, my manager resigned. And I thought, oh my goodness, what am I going to do now? You know, you kind of pull from that bank of resilience and you hunker down and you figure out the environment and what you're capable of. And since then, I have managed IP docketing departments firm wide. I have moved into office management. And about 5 years ago, again, and this is going to be kind of running through the story, running through our discussion today, someone else saw something in me and asked me to take the position in Atlanta, Georgia. And so I decided to come here as a director. This is a small to mid-sized firm. Most of you will understand 35 attorneys, 65
Mhm.
people total. I came from big law in Silicon Valley, 2,000 attorneys, and it was a different culture. And so I came into this firm as the director of administration. And last year, I decided to submit a proposal to the management committee asking them to look at my title and how I had integrated myself into the firm and asked if they would promote me to COO. And they said they would. And so I want to go back a little bit because I forgot to say that at one point in time, I applied for a job and they told me that I could not take the position because I did not have a college degree. So what did I do then? I went back and
Mhm.
got my undergrad. So
Right.
it was not linear. It was function over form, I can say that, but it got me to a place where I have a lot of opportunity and a lot of choices.
Based on your experience and having gone through that personally, if you are to mentor somebody younger who are at the beginning of their career, would you advise them to get different experiences and get those exposures as well? Or would you, looking back, say that there is a more efficient way forward?
I believe the organic method is the best method. And again, I'm jealous of those who can plan out their life and it meet their needs and gives them satisfaction. But I don't know that most of us are in that position. So I would mentor someone to say, look for opportunities and be intentional really about those opportunities, creating a network that can get you to the next step. There's also something that I do, and it's called, it doesn't have a direct term for me, but it's visualizing where I'm going to be and what I want to be, and then filling in those gaps. So, with reference to me getting my undergrad, I knew where I wanted to be, but this was something that I didn't have at the time, and it would get me to the next step. So, my advice to my mentees, and I do have a couple of mentees, is you can't do this by yourself. You know, let's go back to my friend and we studying together in the law library. Your network is super important. Look for those opportunities and be intentional about where you want to go next.
What would be your advice about being intentional about finding the right mentor and pushing oneself? Because what you described were non-linear steps, but you were taking the risks, you were taking additional education when that was required. How can a younger lawyer be intentional about it in 2026?
I think you have to first believe that you can be whatever it is. I think mindset is hugely important. And when you look at genders across the board in any organization or any profession, first I will tell women that we believe we have to meet 100% of the job requirement before we apply for the job. This is a very broad and general statement, but it is a statistic. Men believe that if they meet 50% of the requirements that they will apply for the job. So I encourage women to look at what you believe you have potential to do and apply for that job. That is being intentional. With regards to mentors, the mentor that you have does not have to look like you, does not have to be in the same profession as you. What they have to have is the confidence to be able to lead you and themselves. Look at someone who has delivered on their acts and their goals. Find someone who has basically taken the steps, and it doesn't have to be linear, to be where they want to be, and
Mhm.
see if they will advise you on how to get to where you want to be. The steps are the same, really. It's really about having the confidence, creating the network that will get you there. I have a mentee that I'm working with now. She graduated from law school in 2022. And the first question I asked her was, what do you need from me? And
Mhm.
she said, well, I have a problem getting myself out there. And I said, okay, we're going to do an exercise. We're going to go to dinner and we're going to sit at a bar.
Mhm.
And we are going to strike up a conversation with someone next to us about food, about anything. It doesn't matter. And that gives you the ability to practice those dialogues. It gives you the ability to be uncomfortable in those situations if you have to be, but that sort of intentionality at its basic level.
Mm. I think that's a skill that we, our society, took a step back on after COVID and lockdown, because the social skills certainly suffered. When practicing those skills and being intentional about journey, did you ever personally have a fear of having an imposter syndrome and being concerned that you had to go and learn more things, and with every new position there are new challenges?
Absolutely. I'm feeling imposter syndrome right now. I think, and I'm kind of fueled by things that frighten me, and I know that's not everyone does not have the ability to do that, but I walk into things that I believe I may fear so that I can get better at it. And I look for safe places where I can make a mistake. And I think if people trust you, if they believe in you, they will allow you to make those mistakes. I make a mistake once, and then
Hmm.
I really work to not make that mistake again. But I have been in places where I knew I was not qualified for the entire position. I mean, let's take this one. I came from big law
Hmm.
where I'm not, it isn't pigeonholed, but I was limited in my ability to impact the firm.
Hmm.
And then I came here where I'm leading the entire firm administratively, right? And so I had to learn things like benefits and how much should we pay for insurance and who are all of our vendors that help us keep the trains running on time. And so it's it was a challenge, but one that I was definitely willing to take on because it was the next level.
I want to double click into something that you just said that's quite interesting, that it's okay to make a mistake, but everybody should make only one mistake only once and then learn from that. From your leadership position now and from your role when you mentor, whether it's your colleagues or somebody that you mentor, what is the mistake that almost every lawyer should do so they can learn it firsthand and then never repeat that in their career again?
I think every lawyer should make maybe a hiccup in communication because I think communication is so vital in our organizations, in our practice, that you can make a hiccup in a communication with your partner, with your colleague, but that really puts you in a position to not do that with your client, right? And so if you say something that was maybe just not correct
Hmm.
in your time entry or in your email to a partner, then that will be brought to your attention. And then that is your time to pivot and correct and not make that mistake again. I think communication is just so important. It is what keeps the client there. It is in the work product, of course, right?
Hmm.
But as you learn to finesse your communication with those around you and your ability to read a room while you communicate, I think will take you far.
Certainly, certainly. And everybody, the communication is a skill that always requires practice and improvement. And I think when it comes to the feedback, it's not just the feedback itself, it's also how it's delivered in the communication style. What's your approach to making sure that when you give feedback internally, that it's being received without somebody being defensive?
So I have kind of a quota. It's 5 to 1 that I use, 5 pieces of positive feedback,
Hmm.
and then 1 piece of negative feedback. And it's not always, it doesn't
Hmm.
always come out that way. But I am very conscious of saying things like, in small things, thank you. As I leave for the day, if the receptionist is there, I'll say, thank you for today, or thank you for what you've done. I will walk down the hall, and if someone has done anything for me, as if set up lunch, put together a conference room, thank you so much for that. I believe that communication and my 5 to 1 ratio that I've set up builds trust.
Hmm.
And that is really what's needed when you communicate. And I think if you build trust with your colleagues, with clients, with anyone, then when you do provide negative feedback, then it's not going to be put them in a defensive manner because you have
Hmm.
given them all of this positive feedback. So they know that what you're saying is for their well-being. And so they're not going to take it negatively.
Hmm.
Sorry, you guys.
Do you have an example? Maybe it's something in your communications in the past, or maybe it's something that you've seen from your colleagues that you can define this is what good looks like in terms of the communication, how it was delivered, so that it becomes like a teachable moment.
Absolutely. So we have mid year check ins with our associates. The mentor, the mentee, and a member of our associate development committee will get together mid year, and our associate mid year is in April. And the feedback that's given to them is that's always come across as positive is in a form of a question. And it is, what is it that you need? What is it that you want to learn? What sort of training will help you be a better attorney? And I think that feedback in the form of a question, getting buy in from the other side, as well as communicating that you want to develop them, that you want to make sure that they are being the best that they can be, is a great way to make it a positive.
Hmm. Right. It comes back to being intentional collaboration. So it needs to have
Absolutely.
both parties involved.
Yeah.
You've seen that play out on a smaller law firm and also on a larger firm that you've been part of. Does the dynamic change depending on the law firm size, or just it becomes compartmentalized and then it is more of a function of not maybe chief operating officer, but the head of the department or a head of a team to do that?
I believe expectations are very different in a large law firm versus a small law firm. There is always a common goal. You do your best work for the client. But I think in a large law firm, of course, there is a difference in how you get to that goal, right? There are larger billable hour requirements. There are expectations that production is such a big deal. I think in a smaller firm, the culture is really the driving force. It is about how much people get along, how often they get together outside of work. What is it that you are proud of? What do you celebrate? What do you not tolerate? In a smaller firm is really what is the biggest driver. Now, we're all trying to make money, absolutely,
Hmm.
but it's the culture that changes things, I believe, in a big firm versus a smaller firm.
When you communicate today with the senior leadership of the firm, based on that experience, what has become a non-negotiable for you when it comes to the culture and driving collaboration? What are some things that you always focus on?
Honesty.
Hmm.
And I think for me, starting in this position, that was a big deal. And it's not that people are not honest with each other in my organization, it is about how that honesty comes across.
Hmm.
So, in smaller firms and mid-sized firms, people just don't want to be the bad guy, right? And
Right.
so they don't want to say things like, you are not meeting the expectations of the firm. I need you to do this as soon as possible, because
Hmm.
that puts you in a position of being the bad guy. The non-negotiable for me is be honest with your feedback, be immediate with your feedback. We can't linger, because then there's a misunderstanding or a miscommunication down the road. So that really is my priority.
It's a good one to have. And I think it's helpful to reflect on that because, again, different motivations, and it's good to be aligned in that. Would you say that you have any maybe contrarian positions into term how the firm should be managed on day-to-day operations?
Yes, that's a tough one because I have 17 different ways of doing things because there are 17 different partners here, right? And so when I first started, I created a management committee. The way decisions were made when I started here was based on a consensus of 17 people, which sometimes meant that no decisions were made. And so I believe in structure. I came from a very structured law firm. Sometimes I have to push that aside and say that's not the way it is, with certain situations here. But I think if we had sort of a roadmap, an annual roadmap of what we would address moving forward, short term, long term, things of that sort,
Hmm.
then I believe some of the kinks would come out of the knots if we did it that way.
Could you give an example of something recently that maybe was an internal discussion and how you worked through
Sure,
that
sure. We haven't worked through it yet. Let me just put it
in
that way.
progress?
AI is huge, right, in our
Hmm.
environment right now, and it's confusing. There are so many vendors and variables, and how do you roll it out, and what do you consider? And people are making a ton of money coming into firms, analyzing your practices and your operations and giving you advice on an AI roadmap. So I thought maybe the best thing to do is to create a data governance policy. We have different platforms where you can save documents in different ways or duplicates.
Hmm.
IT is tearing their hair out. The staff can't figure out where things are or how to save it. And I would love to get something like that down on paper.
Hmm.
And because all of the attorneys here practice law as well as handle other firm responsibilities, it's been just a little difficult getting that down on paper. And so it's now almost April, and we started this process in November.
Hmm.
And so we're moving very slowly through it.
Do you think it is important to take time on those decisions to make sure, again, from the collaboration perspective, that everybody aligned? Or are there any other maybe areas where it's what they call, a two-way door, that you can make decision quickly, and then if something doesn't work out, you can also quickly change that? How do you differentiate between the two?
Yeah, I mean, for me, and it's just something personally, I am not afraid to fail. And I think law firms, with their reputation, and attorneys in general, are afraid to fail. And I think that's what actually allows you to grow, are your little failures from time to time. I would love to implement something and then say, this is not working, let's pivot, instead of waiting and waiting to get everything right before we move forward. I have to admit that actually used to drive me crazy in a large firm. I would think, okay, we're doing this and now you're changing it again. But now I understand that it really does take time and iterations of things to really get it right for your organization. So yeah, I would appreciate more rolling out the policy and then seeing what works and what doesn't, and then writing the course as we find out things are not working.
That's interesting. If you had to maybe name one big goal or objective that would be best way to describe your tenure as chief operating officer, what would you name as the main project or the main thing that you're focusing on?
I would say connecting the generations. I think that's a tough one. You and I talked about this earlier about COVID, putting a line, I believe, between the generations. And COVID has changed a lot of things, and the way younger associates practice and live their lives is different than even young-ish partners, right? And so, if I could work to connect the generations, I think that would be very impactful for the firm. For me, it's about leading with purpose, and not just me, but the partners, the associates understanding that we have their best interest at heart and that they should trust us to move this organization forward. But then we would love for them to come along and take some responsibility in also moving this firm forward and understanding that they are the future leaders and we want them to be the best that they can be so that they can lead later on.
Certainly. Talking about the future of the firm, one of the recent initiatives was to bring in a fractional CMO to help you move the firm forward. Could you talk a little bit about what was the decision behind finding the right person, and maybe how's the relationship going so far?
So far, so good. We're in our first couple of weeks of our engagement. This is an organization that several people within our firm knew of and knew those that had founded the organization. I have to tell you, there were two camps, right? One who said, yes, let's go out and get the experts, understanding that they work with firms that are large, mid-size, and small, like, and could provide some insight and guidance. There was another camp that said, we just want someone in house. We want
Hmm.
someone who knows us. We want someone who will work with only us to get us where we need to be. The problem is, and you probably know this, Alex, is sometimes you don't know where you need to be, right?
Right.
You don't know what you need to do. And so I'm all about getting someone that can come in. And I also believe that being an outsider, there's a different perspective. I was an outsider when I came in, and so I could provide a different way of looking at things, a different way of resolving certain issues. And I think having a third party is very, very helpful.
Did the second camp that were resistant initially and they wanted somebody in-house, did they now come around?
Yes. In fact, I got a call from one of those people last week that said after their initial meeting with this group that we had hired the right people.
Was there a specific moment that led to them becoming a believer?
I don't know if there was a certain moment, but my argument to senior leadership was we can't have one or two people in the firm stifle progress.
Hmm.
And if we want a certain initiative, a certain anything, a certain action, then we have to come together as senior leadership and make the decision that's best for the firm. Understanding we have reverence for these people, understanding that we admire who they are and the type of work they do, but we should not allow them to stifle forward progression of the entire firm.
That's a very good point that the firm as a whole need to move. And a thing that I personally love about marketing, and please tell me if it's been your experience as well. Marketing is great because you get feedback relatively quickly on different initiatives and you can have strong beliefs and everybody of course has the best intentions. But when you test things, you find out the right answer. And the best thing you can do is do those experiments, start those initiatives, because the quicker you do that, the quicker you will see the answer that is right for the firm.
I 100% agree with you. And what we started with was data. And our data, the data we pulled was how are we getting work? Who are the people and what are the things that are referring the work to us? What is the source of our business? And that is information that we started with immediately so that that was kind of our jumping off point, right? Where do
Mhm.
we go from here? How do we continue to use those really valuable resources, but also build up the ones and twos that we see on the chart as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think that marketing is one of those places that you start quickly and you pivot quickly.
Absolutely. And I want to talk a little bit more about the data, the way you just described now. In your experience, do you think most partners don't have the accurate numbers in mind when it comes to what's the most profitable case type, who actually brings the most business, what is the genuine costs in terms of potentially billable hours lost as well of generating new business? Is that a blind spot for most of partners?
Absolutely, because it is under the umbrella of business of law. And that's
Hmm.
why they hire people like me to understand the business of law. I really just want them to bill hours. I
Hmm.
want the others in the firm to understand realization, to understand write offs, to understand where that source of business is coming from. So, yeah, it is a blind spot. Should they know in this firm? I think we're getting there. But if I presented the numbers overall to the partners, I don't know that they would immediately say, oh, I knew that.
Hmm.
I think they would say, okay, I understand now, and we're doing a good job, but maybe we could do better. But no, they wouldn't know, and you are absolutely right about that.
Is there a single metric or a KPI that if you could only focus on looking at one number as a North Star, that you would make that KPI that one North Star for growing the firm?
I think the KPI that I would look at would be how are our current clients referring us work?
Hmm.
Because I think, and someone said this yesterday, that he builds a client base where he can get not only their work, but referrals
Hmm.
from those clients. And I think if we started building that client base where we could continue to get additional matters from them, but also look at how they have tentacles outside of where they are and how they can source us additional work, I think
Mm.
that's what we should look at.
Super important. And I think many partners, they take referrals for granted. They don't understand that it is a marketing channel just like any other, and it should be treated as such with the proper time and care it requires.
Absolutely. And I think as you become more senior and move into the partner ranks, you understand that more. But I really want the associates to understand that.
When you think about other marketing channels and way to generate business for the law firm, what do you think is an overrated channel and what do you think is an underrated channel?
I think overrated might be the awards
Mm,
aspect of it all. I think underrated are your law school classmates.
mm,
I think those are the most underrated because as we see, attorneys have friends that are attorneys and they hang out with attorneys. And as you move through the ranks of big law or mid-size or small law firms, you still are connected. And I believe those are the most underrated channels of business.
certainly, because collaboration doesn't have to be, to stop just within the firm. There's
That's
a
right.
wider network for
That's
everybody,
right. That's right.
certainly. So now that you've been working with your marketing partner for quite some weeks and you had the non-believers convert now, how would you define a good marketing partner, whether it is actually somebody in-house or whether it is external partner?
I think they have to have a clear understanding of your business. I would prefer that they have had marketing experience in a law firm.
Hmm.
That would be really helpful, or a legal department of an organization. We tend to do things, legal organizations tend to do things the same way and a few things at a time, but I think they're really important and they're to each organization. And so, what's really helpful about the folks that we're working with is they are familiar with us as a law firm and our reputation, and they are familiar with individuals within the law firm because they have been in leadership programs with these folks throughout the
Hmm.
years. And so they have had relationships with some of us for 7 to 10 years.
Hmm.
So I think getting someone that knows you, that understands who you are and where you have come from, I think is really important because then they have a better idea of how to help you get to where you want to go.
I think it's super important because the nuance, both from the relationship, understanding the particular law firm, the practice, sometimes geography, it can make or break success of any marketing and business develop initiatives.
Agreed.
The other two aspects here, quite curious your take on that as well, is that good marketing partner is somebody who is proactive, bringing the new initiatives and suggestions to the rest of the firm, and also somebody who is able to educate partners on the initiative in a plain English without making it complicated. Because a problem sometimes that happens, um, there might be an agency that promises, everything, and as soon as the contract is signed, the work is delegated to somebody junior that have no idea what they're doing. And when partners do come around, they start to buy in new initiatives and they show interest. They're just not getting the feedback, and it can be quite a disappointing experience. So being proactive and being able to educate if somebody is interesting are the two things that I hear come up as well.
Absolutely. One of the things that we have one partner that is really pushing the business development and marketing initiative. And he told them directly, do not attempt to make any changes until you get to know everyone
Hmm.
in the firm. We want you to interview every single attorney before you tell us what you believe we need to do. But in understanding that they have their own ideas of what has worked, right? They have worked with a certain cadence with law firms that has really upscaled their business development, but it was really important that they got to know us and to speak to us in a way that we could understand. Understanding that we are smart, but
Mhm.
we might not know everything about business development or marketing.
Certainly. I don't know if you had that set yet because the relationship is, like you said, a few weeks old. But what is the big marketing or business development initiative that you're focusing on throughout the year?
So for us, it's really about putting us in front of certain people, understanding where our attorneys are strong. Is their strength, around building additional clients, or is their strength around promoting the firm? Is their strength around being innovative and creative with new practices? It
Hmm.
really is about kind of where they want to go. And I think developing the associates into their niche practices, if they want to be in a niche practice, is something that we are also very focused on.
I think that will probably resonate with a lot of our audience as well. Because nobody wants to work from the client perspective. Nobody wants to work with a lawyer that's generalist. But if there is
Right.
an attorney who is passionate about not just the part of the law, but applying that law maybe to a specific industry or a specific niche, that makes for a better relationship. And especially when firms are very strategic about enabling, whether it's juniors or more senior associates, to be involved in different industries and niches, it just builds for a better future for the law firm.
Absolutely. And we have the ability to put very young associates with partners immediately. In larger firms, young associates are working with senior associates. We are working with partners almost immediately. And so that gives you a breadth of knowledge and the ability to become that sponge and soak up everything that you need. And you can work with as many partners as you want here. And though we are a complex litigation firm, of course, there are specialties around the floor that you can work with as well.
Certainly. Shirley, where can our audience learn more about your work and more about your firm as well?
Well, they can always go to our firm's website. And also, if you want to link up with me on LinkedIn, I'm happy to continue the discussion about what has worked for me or my origin story or what keeps me up at night. And I am happy to do so. I'm a storyteller by nature. And someone said I also like to talk a lot. Okay. So I'm happy to connect with anyone through your audience.
Perfect. We will make sure to include the links so our listeners can find you online. Shirley, it's
Awesome.
been a pleasure. Thank you so much for
Thank you.
coming on.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
Take care.